show in 2018. They had for over 25 years been one of the most successful and decorated bands in the CCM industry, amassing nearly 30 number one hits, 7 million records sold, garnering 24 Dove Awards, 4 Grammys, and an American Music Award. And joining me today is one of the founding members from that band. I am privileged and honored to welcome Mr. Mark Lee to the program today. Mark, how are you doing today, man?
I'm doing really good, and I am privileged and honored to be a part of this interview. Thanks so much for thinking about me and remembering this historic occasion of the Wire album 20-year anniversary. So yeah, it's great to talk about it. We'll walk down memory lane. It should be fun.
Yes, sir. And I'm glad you can join us as a guitarist myself of nearly 27 years. It's always cool to have the guitarist guys join me on the
Oh yeah.
program because when I talk guitar, they know what I'm talking about. Um, so the first question for you, Third Day played their last shows in the summer of 2018, and it seems a lot longer to me, but does it really feel like 6 years have passed since you guys played those last shows?
No, that's the crazy thing. Is it in my mind? And of course, we've had so much happen. We had COVID, which I've got to where it's a season that I try to block out of my memory as much as I can. But it in a lot of ways, like it feels like it's just been like maybe 2 or 3 years, and we'll have, especially the last maybe year or so, I've had more people asking, well, hey, is there a talk about you guys doing a reunion or anything like that? And I'm still of the mindset of like, man, we just did the farewell tour. It feels like to me anyway, but I know it has been a few years, which is crazy to think about.
Yeah, and you and Mac actually started the band back in the early 90s in Powder Springs, Georgia. And you guys, I know in those early days, you guys played a lot of shows locally in the Atlanta area, released a couple, self-produced independent records before making your major label debut in 1995. And take us back to those early days of Third Day. How did you guys get things started? Were you and Mac like together and like, hey, let's form a band?
Yeah, I mean, basically, it was something to that general effect. So I had, way back while the Earth was still cooling in the early '90s, I was in high school here, yeah, in Powder Springs. I actually live next town over. I've come, kind of full circle. I've lived very close to where I grew up, but yeah. So senior year of high school, it was myself and like four other friends of mine. Everybody played guitar, and then we're working on a song, and whoever like either got their latest to practice or didn't like the song that we were working on, they would be assigned, okay, you're going to have to play bass, and everybody else play guitar. There was a talent show that was they were going to be doing it at my high school. Mac also went to the same high school. Mac and I were the just the super nerds that were both in the marching band. And so, because I was in the marching band with Mac, we were acquaintances. I mean, we knew each other a little bit, had hung out, a couple times. We weren't like best friends or anything. And a couple of the other guys that I played guitar with were like, okay, we got to see about getting a singer. We had seen Mac had performed at like some kind of school function not long before that, and they're like, all right, we got to get Mac to sing for this talent show. Because you're in the marching band with him, I got assigned to be the guy to ask him to be in this talent show with us, and it was so awkward. It was like if you imagine like asking somebody to prom, or it was like that kind of thing. Like walking up to him in between classes, and like I'm all nervous, and I'm like, hey, so was wondering if you wanted to join my band. I mean, it was pretty much about the extent of it, and he just looked at me really funny, and I was like, oh no, he's going to say no. He just goes, I can't play guitar, because in his mind he knew that I had all these guys that I played guitar with, and he thought that I was wanting him to play guitar. And I was like, no, we want you to sing. And he was like, well, yeah, let's do it. That'll be great. The talent show got canceled, probably because they found out we were going to be there. The talent show got canceled, but we had this group of musicians. We had Mac singing, so we formed a couple of little garage bands, and Mac was kind of the singer for both of those garage bands. Right at the end of our senior year of high school, Mac had this, and he actually has a song. If you're familiar with his solo material, he has a song called 1991, and that was the year that we graduated high school. He had this dramatic, he'd become a Christian when he was a, young child, 10, 11, something like that, and didn't really, take it seriously, didn't really live his faith out, that kind of thing. but he had a very dramatic, God called him back, rededication kind of experience when he was a senior in high school. So as part of that, he came to the rest of the band and said, "Hey, I just don't really feel comfortable with the kind of music that we're doing. We're doing, cover music." And if you think back to the kinds of songs that were popular around like 1990, 1991, it was all these like pop metal kind of band, Poison and Warrant and all this, and all the songs. The lyrics were horrible. So Mac came to us and was like, "Hey, I just don't really feel comfortable singing these songs. So I feel like I've got to, not do the band anymore." And I was absolutely devastated. It was as if somebody had died or something. Because for me, doing music and this, I had always wanted to do music. It was my dream to be in a band. Finally had a band going, and then the singer decided that he didn't want to be a part of it anymore. So I was just absolutely devastated. But Mac and I were together, did graduation, and it was like the summer, in between, high school and college, and I was just kind of hanging out over at Mac's house one day. I think we had gone to see a concert or something like that. I don't remember the exact situation, and we were just kind of talking about how, man, it's a shame that we can't do music anymore. And I have no idea where this came from. I was just like, "Hey, what if we started a Christian band?" And I don't really know where that thought came from. And Mac was like, "Yeah, let's do that. That's great." And we thought we were some kind of pioneers. We did not know that there were artists like Michael W. Smith, Amy Grant, Carmen, Stryper, Petra that had all been making this great Christian music for many years before. We thought that this was this total novelty thing, that, hey, we're going to do rock music with Christian lyrics. And then, of course, the next day we went to the record store and saw that they have a whole Christian music section, and quickly got
Right.
educated. We became big fans of artists like Rich Mullins and Wes King and Michael W. Smith, I mentioned. So we started out, it was very much an acoustic. We went and saw Rich Mullins' show, and it was at the height of when he was doing his hammered dulcimer and had like this little acoustic band. And we were like, all right, we want to do that. So for the first probably year or two of Third Day, we were this very stripped down acoustic thing. And then we met up with David, who played drums with Third Day, and Ty, the bass player. Let's see, Mac and I started things in like 91, so it was probably like late 92. So maybe about a year and a half later, we met up with David and Ty. And when we started as this four-piece thing, it just quickly, we're trying to do the acoustic thing, but everybody by this point, bands like the Black Crowes and Pearl Jam and Smashing Pumpkins and all this really cool rock stuff. So we still have our acoustic instruments and we're trying to rock. And then finally at some point we're like, okay, we give up. Let's be a rock band. And so that was kind of, I'd say maybe 92, 93 was when we started really, when we decided to do more of the rock direction. We really started taking everything a little bit more seriously. And then as part of that, we were like, feel like we almost have the lineup, but we just need some kind of extra, thing to just sonically push it over the cliff to, have it sound like we wanted to. We met up with Brad Avery around that same time. He joined the band, if my memory serves me correctly, I think it was at the end of like 94. So, and then really from about 94 on, by the time we did the Grey Dot record, that was when Brad came in and was playing, that was, okay, this is Third Day, as everybody knows us. So from about 94 until, we did our farewell tour in 2018. So depending on who you ask, Mac and I had been making music. We were called Third Day by probably the end of 91. So you could say 27 years or 26, whatever. But so we had this great, amazing career. And just feel really blessed to have been a part of this crazy, thing that God did through these punk kid musicians from outside of Atlanta. So it was a really neat thing to be a part of.
Yeah, I remember seeing the documentaries that came as part of the chronology records you guys released, the volume 1 and 2, and I saw the home video of you guys playing in the garage. I think you were covering Black Crowes "Hard to Handle" or
Yeah,
something like
yeah.
that. But I was very drawn to that Southern rock sound too. I mean, I listen to a lot of classic rock now. What's They consider it classic rock. It's funny because back when I was originally listening to this stuff in the 80s, it was a lot of it was pretty new, but now kind of aging us, making us feel old. It's called classic rock. And I played guitar myself for the last 27 years, and over the time that you're with Third Day, you and Mac actually shared a lot of the songwriting
Mhm.
duties with the band. But I'm curious as a guitarist myself, how did you get your start? When did you pick up a guitar, and what was? Do you remember what your first guitar, the make and model was of your first guitar?
Yes, so I do. So I have done music just literally as long as I can remember. I remember they used to have even being a tiny, tiny little toddler, and they had the little xylophone that had the little pull thing, and I would like literally pull that thing around the house, and I would play. So I've always loved music. I had a Winnie the Pooh record player, and once we got
Mhm.
bored with all of the Disney music or whatever, my brother and I would listen to Rhinestone Cowboy, Glenn Campbell. I had when Ace Frehley when Kiss did their little solo albums, I had the little Ace Frehley New York Groove, and we would play that over and over again. So, yeah, always been drawn to rock music and guitar for whatever reason. So I started doing violin for a long time, but for whatever reason, when I first wanted to do more rock music, I don't know if it was just the kind of music that was popular at the time. But I first wanted to play keyboards, actually, which is kind of crazy to think back on. But then I think I was about, let's see, 15. My dad actually got me a guitar for my birthday that year. I had, and it's a whole other story. I literally put a book out about this that kind of tells my story. But I got hit by a truck when I was a freshman in high school, and
Mhm.
was in and out of school, in and out of the hospital with my injuries and everything. And during that time, I was sitting around watching MTV, just 24/7, just about. And so one day, my dad came walking in, and I think it was Pink Floyd. They had just put a live album out, and here's David Gilmour up there, playing this guitar solo. And my dad just walked in the room. He's like, just didn't even skip a beat. He was just like, "Oh, son, you could do that." And so he got me a guitar for my 15th birthday. So that was when I started playing, and just something about that, like I said, always done music. It's always been a big part of who I am. I played violin when I was little. I played piano. I was in the marching band in high school. So it was something I always did, but just something just really clicked about when I started playing guitar. People always say, like, if there's something that is harder for other people to do and it just comes really easy for you, then that may be, not always, but that may point to like this talent that you have or whatever. So just always just guitar just came very easy, very natural for me. And so starting really from that moment on, like I, flipped from being, it's going from this doing the violin to this, with the guitar. But yeah, so uh, growing up in the South, and especially during that time, you had all these bands like REM and the Black Crowes, Georgia Satellites. We had all these sort of local Georgia bands that were really doing well for themselves, and so that was it was a big inspiration to see, wow, here are these bands from like right around here, like the Black Crowes, literally cross town. I have friends that went to their high school, kind of thing. So it was a big inspiration to be like, hey, if these local guys are able to do this, then hey, we can do it too. And then also just I think influence wise, we listened to Black Crowes, REM. A little bit later, you had Collective Soul come along. A lot of these local bands were really big influence on us and our sound as we were trying to figure out how to be a band and how to perform live. And then you got to mention too Christian artists also from around here. I mentioned Wes King earlier, was Nashville guy now, but he was uh, from Atlanta originally. He was a big inspiration. And then there was a band called Jacob's Trouble that they were really big in sort of the Christian rock, which was a much smaller subgenre back then. But they did local shows all the time. So when we were first starting out, like literally, there's Mac, Mark, Ty, David, like at the back of the venue watching the show, and not literally, but almost literally, like taking notes. Like, oh, this is what you do. This is how you put on a show. This is how you get people's attention and have them interact. And so they were huge influence on us. So but yeah, as a guitar player, yeah. So you were asking about my first guitar. So my dad
Yeah.
got me this. Took me down to the music store, and it was yes, we bought it at the music store, but it's basically like a pawn shop special. acoustic guitar. I wish I could say I still have it. I think I let a friend borrow it and never got it back or something. And it was, I would tune it up and it would sound great for a chord. So I'm sure when I tested it out at the music store, sounded great. Then took it home and I realized that it was set up so bad that you'd play that one chord and it would sound fine, and then you'd switch to another one and it was just horrible. So,
Mm.
and that would be, if there's any like aspiring guitar players that are happen to be watching this, make sure. And you nowadays you can go down to a music store, spend $100. Well, with inflation, it's probably 150 now, but spend $150, get a starter guitar, whether it's get you like a Fender Squire or whatever the acoustic equivalent of that would be, and they're going to be set up and they're so much easier to play than the your uncle has a guitar that's been sitting in a closet or in a garage and it's not set up and it's really hard to play. If you get a new guitar, it's going to sound really good. So that was my first acoustic, and then I saved up one summer and went out to the local music store, and I got a Saga Gladiator. So the Saga Gladiator was my first. I wish we're talking about it. It's like, yeah, I had this really cool like '60s Telecaster that somebody gave me when I was a kid. No, I had this Saga Gladiator, and it was kind of horrible. But so that was my first guitar. Then I saved up the next summer and went to the store, and I marched in and I was going to buy a Tele. That was my plan. And the salesman there was very good at his job and somehow talked me out of buying a Tele and into buying a PV Generation Series 2. And so that was, and it actually was a beautiful guitar and actually sounded pretty good. I mean, it was very much a 80s guitar, set up to
Yeah.
have the locking tremolo and all that crazy stuff that everybody did back then. So played that for a while, and then I'm trying to think, when we first started doing the third day thing, we actually had a friend who, if you see early footage of us playing, I had this blue Strat Plus that I played, and it had the lace sensor pickups on it. And we actually had a friend who was going on a missions trip and wrote a letter to Fender, the guitar company, and said, "Hey, I'm doing this missions trip, going overseas, and if there's anything you guys can do to to help me out." I think he was thinking, if they like sent him a capo or a pack of guitar picks or something, but they actually sent him a Strat to take on his trip. So that was really cool. Just somebody, that was in a good mood that day at Fender, read the letter at the right time. So he had that, and he was like, you know what, I'm not really doing anything actively with music right now. So why don't you guys just sort of borrow it on a permanent basis? So I played that guitar. I think Ty, that played bass with us, I think he probably has that guitar now. But yeah, that's a super cool guitar. The lace sensor pickups, it's made for like the Eric Clapton kind of like the creamy, you're going to plug into your Strat into like a Marshall and have like that big sound. So it was cool. I quickly figured out, me being more of like the Southern rock guy, I finally got a Tele. My girlfriend at the time, now wife, got me for my birthday in probably about 95, got me one of those cool Fender thin line Teles that has the little F hole on it. And so I played that live. If you see any footage of us playing live around 96, 97, I'm either playing that Tele or that blue Strat. And then we for many years worked with Epiphone guitars, and as soon as I played an SG, I was like, okay, this is like the perfect live guitar for me. It's very similar to that Tele kind of thing. You have the thinner
Right.
body, more of your tone is coming from the amp than from the actual guitar. Whereas if you're playing like a Strat or a Les Paul, you're leaning on the body of the guitar and the type of wood and all those kinds of things are going to affect the tone more. But a Tele or a SG, to me anyway, this is kind of my general philosophy on it. It's more of like just a block of wood with a pickup on it, and so I love playing Tele. So and SGs. Those are big guitars that I still love to play. And then we started working with PRS in, I believe, 2003. And they actually approached us. It was really interesting. They were like, hey, and it was the president, Jack Higginbotham, super nice guy. He was the president of PRS at the time. And he reached out to us. He's like, hey, I've never done this before. But my wife and I were just big fans of Third Day. We were in the car listening to your record. I think it was probably Offerings or maybe Offerings 2 that was out. And he was like, you know, my wife was like, why don't you guys, or why doesn't Third Day play PRS guitars? And he's like, well, I don't know. Let's call them and find out. And so they actually reached out to us. And at first, I was like, I've always been more of like a vintage, like Telly, SG, like I was talking about, kind of guitar player. And at the time, you think about PRS guitars, especially back then, and you start thinking about Creed and Santana. You start thinking about it as this very '90s guitar. That was my impression anyway. But I was
Yeah.
like, if you want to, send me a guitar to try out live, and we'll see how it goes. And they sent me a single cut, which was their kind of. There was actually a whole lawsuit about it that it kind of looks like a Les Paul. So there was a big lawsuit between Gibson and PRS. PRS won the lawsuit, but they sent me one of those, and then they sent a McCarty, and both of those guitars, I loved them. As soon as I played it, I was like, yeah, this is awesome. So had this great relationship with PRS all the way from like '03. That really continues to the present day. I still play their stuff and love them. So yeah, so hopefully that gives you a good little guitar perspective on Third Day and my journey.
It's kind of funny that you mentioned PRS because the guitar that I have now is the Tremonti signature model PRS. That's one of my electrics, and then I have a Yamaha Pacifica because I had always loved the just the aesthetics and look and feel of a Fender Stratocaster, but my wallet didn't really like the price of those very much, so I had to kind of go with the guitar that looked like that. So I went with the Yamaha Pacifica. So that was actually my first electric.
Yeah,
And I have one again now, and then I have a Yamaha acoustic. So for me, I've played a bunch of different guitars, and the PRS was the one that, I like rock music. So PRS is the one that I really like. And Tremonti is one of my guitar heroes. So I mean,
he's great.
uh, that guitar is amazing. I love it. And it's funny you mentioned you actually mentioned like our stories are similar in many ways in how we got started with the guitar. Because I remember I was in marching band too. I played trumpet in marching band,
Yeah,
but then after a while, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to continue this after high school and the college. So that's when I picked up the guitar, and I've been playing since. But you also mentioned, you were watching MTV, Pink Floyd, David Gilmour, and that's David Gilmour, Eric Clapton, Jerry Cantrell from Alice in Chains, and Mark Tremonti. Those are like my four guitar inspirations, and
Mount Rushmore of guitar.
yeah, exactly. And it was actually the thing that I was watching was also on MTV. The program that I watched that really got me thinking about playing was Eric Clapton Unplugged. I sat there and
Oh,
watched him
oh
play
yeah.
the Unplugged show, and I'm like, wow, I want to do that. So Clapton is really the one, old Slowhand himself is the one that really got me started. And I've been playing ever since. It's been an absolute joy to play. And you know, you mentioned that you've done the PRS thing and stuff like this, but I don't remember which record this was. It was either Wire or it was Wherever You Are, but you guys also had like a partnership briefly with Chevrolet. And I remember the label sending me a shirt with it looked like an old school 50s look to it. It had a guy in like an old Chevy holding a guitar. It said Third Day, they rock, we roll. And
Oh, so cool. I need
I
one of those. I
I
didn't even
wish
know
I
you
still
did that.
had that shirt, and I got it from Providence. Providence sent me that shirt, and I don't know where it came from. I never saw it for sale on the tours.
Yeah,
I always thought that
I
was really
really need that
cool.
shirt. That's awesome. Wow.
Yeah, so today marks the 20th anniversary of a record that it means a lot to me because it was really my full head-on introduction into Third Day. I told you pre-interview that a friend of mine was in a Christian rock band, and they had covered Consuming Fire. And after borrowing the Offerings record, I'm like, wow, I like this. So, when I gave my life to Jesus, I started working for a Christian radio station and had the opportunity to be able to pick the music that was playing. And I remember this was back when they sent physical pre-releases and singles. You didn't get them digitally like you do now, but we got a copy of your single "Come On Back to Me" says this is the brand new single from Third Day. It's from the upcoming May 4th release, Wire. And I remember listening to this song. I'm like, wow, I love this song. And so Come On Back to Me was actually the first song that I chose to spin in rotation on the radio station that I was working at. And, for the last 20 years that I've been working in the Christian music industry, I still remember that. Third Day was kind of my start in the industry. So today being the 20th anniversary release of this record, it was the seventh album that you guys released. And take us back to the recording process of this. I mean, you guys had, I think at that time, you guys' last studio record, like full studio record, was Come Together. You guys had done,
Yeah.
Offerings 2 after that. But take us back to the writing recording process of Wire and how you guys got that started.
Yeah, so we with Wire, and there's probably three albums in our career that were like this, where we felt like we were at a place in our career that we sort of wanted to be just a little bit more adventurous musically, maybe take some more musical risks than we would normally take. And the other two being Conspiracy Number Five, our second album, um, then Wire, and then the other one would be Miracle, the one that we did with Brendan O'Brien a few years ago. Which actually, all of those, Conspiracy, with just the way that it was recorded and mixed, sounds very dated, and I hate that because it's a really cool batch of songs, and we worked really hard on that album. It's kind of a tough listen to me now, not really because of the songs and even what we were trying to do, but just sonically, I just don't love how that one turned out. That's probably the only album that I'm really that way with in our catalog. I feel like everything else has aged pretty well. And then Wire, and then the other one, Big Miracle with Brendan O'Brien, which I think that one's actually aged pretty well. That's a pretty cool album. So, and I'm this way too, like with, say the Beatles. Like I always love an album like Rubber Soul, where it's one where they're kind of coming out of one musical phase. They haven't quite gotten to like the Sergeant Pepper kind of thing, but they're trying some different things. I always love those types of albums, and I feel like Wire is kind of one of those for us. But yeah, we had been through this long season of, we did the first Offerings album came out in 2000, and it was originally meant to be a just kind of like this extra album on top of our normal album releases. It was going to be this special, like we're just showing like here's this worship thing that we do. Also, we really wanted to play up the live thing. We wanted people to see that, hey, we're a really good live band, and capture that energy that we had from our live shows. So we did that with Offerings, and then it ended up just on its own. It just took off like sales wise, and the concerts, and we concerts became more of a worship type experience, which was great. It was awesome. Loved being a part of that move of God in like kind of the late 90s, early 2000s, as more and more people were realizing the importance of worship, and how, hey, we can worship and do more modern sounding kind of music along with it. So loved that we were a part of that. But then once we and then we Come Together, like got sort of released like as just during that season as this. It almost, we had intended like Offerings to be like the sort of extra record, but it almost felt like Come Together was like the extra thing that got put out during this big worship season. So we'd sort of gone through all of that of the Offerings, and then we did Come Together, Offerings 2. We were really like riding this wave of success, but at the same time we were feeling this pressure of like, okay, what do we do now? How do we, worship, was always going to be a part of what we do. It always had been, but we wanted to be like, we don't want to like stop being a rock band and now we're just going to do worship. Not that anything would have been wrong with that. I think that would have been fine. Probably career-wise, it might have been even a better decision, but we, that just really wasn't where our heart was. We didn't really feel like that's what God had called us to do. So we were very deliberate about what came next. So after doing the worship albums, we wanted to write and record an album that was more, especially lyrically, geared towards maybe somebody that didn't grow up going to church. So we're very deliberate lyrically about, we're saying the same message, sharing God's love with people, encouraging people, but we didn't want to use the same language that we normally would. So and I, still looking back, have songs like "I Believe." It's very obvious, what that song is about. But then you also have a song like "Wire," the title track, that was really, in hindsight, it's so ridiculously obvious what it was about. It's here we are, like we've suddenly become successful, and we're trying to cope with success, and how do we handle that and still be ourselves, still live out our faith through the music. But at the time, the title track "Wire" was, for me, growing up in Georgia back in 1970. Great Walinda, one of a super famous tightrope walker, did this tightrope walk up in the North Georgia mountains, and I had been, when I was a kid, had gone up to that site, and I think still even today you can go and see some of the little support towers that they put up when they were doing the tightrope across this canyon up there. When I was a little kid, that just blew my mind, and so I had always wanted to write a song about that. And I was driving around one day, and that chorus just hit me, like the whole thing just, and this very rarely happens. I'm just driving, and I just start singing, "I am walking on the wire," and I was like, this is really cool. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. And then the next time I was at my guitar, I had this other part that ended up being the verse of the song, and it also was in 6/8. It was in a different key, but as I put those together, it even though it does this weird key change thing, it like totally worked. It was great. So that was really what "Wire" was. I wasn't at all, thinking, oh, we need to write a song about us coping with, now we're successful, what do we do? But that obviously, like, you look at it, and that's what the song was about. But yeah, so that was really like the goal, was we really wanted to just, obviously, yes, we're going to continue to share our faith, but we want to do it in a way that if you didn't grow up listening to Christian music, if you didn't grow up going to church, that you still can be encouraged. So that was the goal of that. And we knew doing that, because lyrically it's not as straightforward with the lyrics. We knew that it was going to be a little bit of a harder sell with Christian radio, and they played "I Believe." It actually ended up being a really, really big song for us during that season. But outside of that, that was kind of it. So we kind of quickly had to regroup and go and do "Wherever You Are," which was great. Love that album too. But so I feel like if you interview anybody in the band, everybody's going to say "Time" is their favorite album, and then there's going to be one other that somebody's going to say, and it's usually going to be like "Wire" or "Revelation" is another one that everybody likes. For me, it's like "Time," and then "Wire" is like right there. I love that album. Love the season that we were in as we recorded that. And then you were asking kind of about the recording. We worked with Paul Ebersold on the album, who he's still a big producer. At the time, he had just worked with Three Doors Down, and that they were like really like at the height of their success. And so we had met with several producers, but we just, Paul is from Memphis, so he's a Southern guy like ourselves, and so sometimes you just meet somebody, you just start talking, and it just feels like you've just always known them. And it was that way with Paul. Just very, very good hang, with him. And so we decided to work with Paul. In doing so, we also were agreeing that we're going to basically move to Memphis, Tennessee for about a month. So we did that, and it ended up being a great process. It was difficult. My first daughter was born at the end of October, and then we, about maybe a month later, right after Thanksgiving, went for basically between Thanksgiving and Christmas of '03. We were in Memphis recording with Paul, but it was a great experience. We had worked with Monroe Jones for the last about 4 records before that. He was really good about creating this environment where everybody's comfortable in the studio. We were way more of a live focused kind of band at the time. So Monroe's like, all right, well, let y'all just set up in the studio like you're about to do a show and just play, and we'll figure out how to mic it up and record and do that. And that was a great process for us. Then turning the page and doing "Wire" with Paul, we kept some of that. We would have a lot of times it would be David, the drummer, and myself, or depending on the song, it might be me or it might be Brad, other guitar player, maybe Ty. Would have a couple of people play live to kind of get the song off the ground, and then we would go to the overdub. So instead of having everybody playing together, we'd have like a smaller group of two or three. You do some things just where you have the energy with the drums, and then we would kind of build everything on top of that. So we did all of that, and then we recorded guitars. That was more of a traditional, like when you think about recording an album, you go in and you do the overdubs. And so I spent probably a good week or two in Memphis with Paul recording guitars. And then we had a break for Christmas, and then at the beginning of the next year, we kind of flip flopped. Paul came down to Atlanta, and we recorded at, I believe it was Doppler Studios, which I don't think is there anymore. Recorded there with Paul. We had Don McAllister, great, amazing engineer. That was when we first started working with Don, and Don actually worked with us on several projects after that. So it was great. It's kind of two different seasons. We went up to Memphis and recorded some, and then recorded with Paul and Don in Atlanta, and it's really great. So it's a really good season of, I feel like we had finally figured out what to do in the studio on the records with Monroe, and then now we work with Paul with a different producer, and we kind of had our experience from before. We were able to, adapt a little bit to the way Paul worked, and I feel like we made a really great album. Paul is a big guitar player. He had some really cool gear, had some cool acoustics and amps and things, and so it was a lot of fun to work with him on that record for sure.
Yeah, do you actually have guitars behind you? Do you have some riffs from the Wire record that you can play for us? That
Actually, do I can couple things. If I have a capo, oh, I know I do because I just saw it. Okay, I'm gonna have to look and see. Oh, here it is, back here. Hang on, I'll be right back. So,
you're good.
um, and I've got an acoustic. It probably would be cooler if like I had a whole big setup and played electric or something. Boy, I hope I remember. I hope this is the right key for this song. Let's see. I think this is right. So you had mentioned "Come On Back to Me," and I'm going to be 100% honest. I have not played this song in. Let's see. Let's see. Okay, that's not right. So I think it's going to be this. Yeah. So the beginning has, and I think that Brad, our guitar player, and Paul came up with this in the studio, and it's just a really cool, just very distinct that there it is. So we had that, and then I came in with I hope this is the right key. Yeah, there it is. So you had like these two things going. It was a really like a heavier, the thing that Brad's playing at the beginning, the super cool thing, and then you had like the band kick in, and I was doing this like kind of little delay, and of course I'm playing it on acoustic with the little. I think that's the right chord, but yeah, it was really cool having like the two guitars. It was so much fun during that season to be a two guitar band, and Brad and I would really we had very few conversations about, okay, you're gonna do this and you're gonna do this. We would both just kind of play whatever we wanted to, and usually because we're just coming at it from different angles, usually it would work out. There would be sometimes we'd start working on a song and I'd be like, man, this would be a really cool song to play slide on. And I'll get a slide out, and I'm starting to play, and then I look across the room, and Brad also has a slide out. And I'm like, oh, I'll let him play slide. I'll figure something else out. So every now and again, we would do something to make sure we're staying out of each other's way. But usually, I would say 90% of the time, Brad would like just absolutely play whatever he wanted to, just his first instinct on it. I would play whatever I wanted to, the first instinct I would have. Me being this, being from Atlanta, being more of this like Southern rock kind of guy, and Brad was from Illinois originally. I don't know the exact story. I think he's from the same town as, I think it's one of the guys in REO Speedwagon. I hope I'm remembering this right. Could be wrong, but some other, rock band, but that was a lot of the music we were talking about before, that they call it classic rock now, but
Yeah.
and it was just called rock. So, Brad, and he was a little, just, like 2 years older than us, which, big deal now. But at the time, that meant that he was listening to more of like the Journey and Survivor, and trying to think of some of those other bands that were big back then. Kansas, that kind of more the what you think about as like the classic rock. And then I was listening to the Black Crowes and Georgia Satellites. There's a band from Atlanta called Driving and Crying that I was a big fan of. So we would just both of us just kind of do our thing, and it would just work. So that was super cool. It was
And
fun.
I think it really you really hear that on the record. I mean, it's just a great record, not only lyrically, but it's just a great record musically with the guitars. And I'm glad that Wire was really my full introduction in the Christian rock scene, because I would go on to discover so many other bands that would come after you guys. And Third Day's been done for about 6 years now. You guys played your last shows about 6 years ago, and you're still continuing your work as a musician, doing guitar stuff now. Tell us about what you're doing now. I hear that you're passing your six string knowledge on to young students now. So tell us about that journey for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we did our farewell tour with Third Day, my plan, all along was like, I'm just gonna keep doing this. I'm not gonna be with the band anymore. I know, we were at this level. We're playing at, big, we're playing to thousands of people every night, kind of thing. I knew that it wasn't gonna be that. And I was like, I'm just gonna go do solo. I'm just gonna go, play at churches and just love on people. And it's a great season. I actually am still doing that quite a bit on the weekends. But it was so refreshing to go from playing with this band, and once you start like sound check about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Our schedule every day was set like not quite, but almost down to the minute. Like we're tied up from like 3 o'clock in the afternoon until after the show, get on the bus, to go to the next show. It was really cool to go from that to I'm showing up at like a little country church in South Carolina by myself with a guitar and bag of t-shirts or whatever, and to do these little shows and have like whether it's the pastor or the worship pastor, sound guy. I finished sound check and they're like, "Hey man, do you want to like after sound check you want to go grab some lunch?" Well, yeah, let's go. And I was never able to do that really before, so it was so fun. Did that and still do that to a large extent. Then, of course, COVID happened, and so the whole touring thing kind of went to a screeching halt there for a year or two. During that time, I was like, well, I'm just, kind of sitting around here at the house, just sort of twiddling my thumbs. And I had a couple of opportunities come up. I had a local church I found out was looking for a worship pastor. And so, I've talked about it with my wife. We kind of prayed about it, and I was like, well, yeah, I could do that. So I started leading worship at the local level. Did that for a couple of years at a couple of different churches in Atlanta. And then I also had this opportunity to just kind of fell in my lap at the school where my oldest daughter graduated 2 years ago. My youngest daughter still goes to school there. The orchestra teacher was going on maternity leave. She taught a guitar class, so they were looking for somebody to come in and teach guitar, and they asked me. I was like, yeah, sure. I mean, I'd love to. So that was 4 years ago, and first started out doing guitar. Then they had me do a songwriting class. Now I'm also doing a music business class. I'm doing history of rock and roll, which that's super fun. And then they have a chapel band that leads worship every week for the chapel services at the school. So I'm now the director of chapel bands at the school. And we actually last night we did this big night of worship, and it's such an amazing thing. You don't really realize it until you see it, but there's just something about when you see kids genuinely worshiping that it's just such a moving thing. And so it's been such an honor. Like I said, it was not on my bingo card at all to be a teacher, but it's something that I just sort of fell into. And you don't know it until it happens. But to be in this situation where I'm teaching these kids how to get a good guitar tone, or teaching them about Nashville numbers and whatever the situation might be, but to go, wow, this is like I've been like qualified for this job. Like my resume has been building towards doing this like for my whole life. So it's been such an honor. It's just so neat to be able to like pass that torch on to the next generation, and knowing that Yeah, maybe one or two of the students that I work with might end up moving on and doing this at some kind of professional level. But for the rest of them, they can always, serve at the local church level. They can go help lead the worship team at their church. I mean, it's a really important thing, I feel like, to equip, the next generation in worship so that they can go and take the mantle and go and lead. So it's been a really great thing. And yeah, and I'm still doing music. I had been writing. Actually, I have a big writing appointment with a friend of mine this afternoon, writing some new worship stuff that I'm hoping to get in the studio. The school year's finishing up in a couple weeks here. Hoping to get back in the studio this summer and have some new music later this year. It's going to have, I was talking as we were doing the interview about Wire, about how we'd been in this worship season. Felt like it was time to do something else, and I have really felt this calling over the last maybe year or so of I've been doing like I've been trying single handedly, even though like contemporary Christian music and Christian rock, Christian alternative, even though that doesn't really exist anymore, it's all kind of gone to the worship. I've been single handedly trying to keep that going. I've really felt this, I think, because I've been working with these kids at the school and because I've been leading at the local church level, I've really felt this pull more towards doing worship. So this next recording that I do will definitely be more of a worship-based kind of thing. And I'm really excited about doing that. I think it's going to be a neat season, and I'm excited to see where God takes it. So,
Amen. Well, last question for you. Obviously, this is an obvious question for you because a lot of people that have been longtime Third Day fans and did not get a chance to see the band on that 2018 farewell tour, including myself. The tour didn't make it down here to Florida, so I was kind of bummed in that aspect. But we did have the live recordings of those shows come out a couple of years ago. But a lot of people ask, reunion shows are kind of a thing these days. Bands that have not played together for a long time eventually get back together, maybe do a tour or kind of revisit some of the old music. But a lot of people are probably asking you and Mac and the other guys from the band, has there ever been a discussion about Third Day maybe doing like a one-off or a reunion tour or something at some point in the future? Has it ever hit y'all's radar?
that's a great way to put it. Yeah, it hits the radar, and I mean it's been mentioned in passing a couple times. Mac and I, especially, Mac's been super busy the last maybe year or two. He put a solo record out. He's been touring like just crazy. He's been super busy. Before that, he and I kind of had this standing like Waffle House hang. We would go, about once a month. We'd go grab breakfast together, and we discussed it. It never got beyond the man. It would be kind of cool if we did this. Never got super serious about it. But I think the fact that we've had that the subject has been brought up a couple times. Uh, it will happen down the road at some point. We don't have any kind of active plans of yes, we're gonna do some kind of reunion thing. And I promise I'm not doing the thing where like I'm saying there's nothing and then in like 2 weeks there's gonna be an announcement. There's not anything on the horizon right now. But it's definitely one of those never say never kind of things. Going back to at the very beginning when we were talking and just how. It to me, it feels like we just did the farewell tour, so it to me still feels a little bit soon to maybe do something. We had when we finished the farewell tour, we're on good terms. Like I said, Mac and I still talk. Everybody texts. The whole band was like on some group text within the last week or so, so we all stay in contact pretty good. But we've kind of said, okay, well, let's give it 5 years and then we'll see, and then. When that 5 year thing came around, I was like, it still feels like we just did the farewell tour. So I am, like I said, I'm sure at some point we'll do something, but there's not any kind of active plans right now. I've been super excited to see everything that Mac has done over the last couple of years. I know how hard it is to do the as a band thing and then to strike out and do the solo thing. And I know he's been working really hard at it, and I'm super proud of him. And I'm, just this kind of new season of life I've been in with the teaching and the worship leading and stuff. So I'm really excited about where God has us now. So when I do ask things about the reunion or getting back together or doing a tour or whatever. I always just say never, but we don't have any active plans right now. So
Well, there's hope in the future with that at some point. Sounds like it. Well,
yeah.
Mark, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an honestly a pleasure and honor to have you here on Kingdom Builder TV with us. And just thank you for taking the time to talk about Wire and just third day, man. It's good to hear from you, and pray that the Lord continues to use you in every aspect and whatever He has you doing, man.
Awesome. All right. Well, hey, thanks again for having me. This was so fun. Walking down memory lane a little bit. This is awesome.